Hi, everyone. Good to see you again. I'm Anne-Marie Green.
And I'm Vladimir Dutin. Thanks for joining us. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is dismissing Iran's claims that it busted a CIA spy ring. Iran's state news agency says the country arrested 17 Iranian citizens accused of working for the U.S. But Secretary of State Pompeo says the regime has, quote, a long history of lying. This, of course, after Iran seized a British-flagged oil tanker near the Strait of Hormuz last week.
Tensions have spiked ever since President Trump withdrew the U.S. from the Iran nuclear deal last year. CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab is following the latest in the United Arab Emirates.
This video, released by Iran's Revolutionary Guard, apparently shows in real time the British-flagged Stena Impero oil tanker forced into Iranian territorial waters. Radio recordings also captured the moment a British warship warned the Iranians not to interfere with the vessel.
If you obey, you will be safe. Alter your course to 360 degrees immediately. Over.
7 Navy patrol boat, this is British warship Foxtrot 236. Please confirm that you are not intending to violate international law by unlawfully attempting to board the MV Stena.
But minutes later, Iranian commandos took control of the vessel, apprehending the international crew and replacing the Union Jack with the flag of Iran. This morning, Prime Minister Theresa May is considering retaliation, including freezing Iranian assets. The seizure of the Stena Impero comes just 2 weeks after the UK's Royal Marines helped seize an Iranian tanker off the coast of Gibraltar. It's believed the vessel was carrying oil to Syria in breach of EU sanctions. Iran's foreign minister had this to say about the seizure and economic sanctions from the West.
This is economic terrorism, pure and simple. We need to repeat it again and again.
All right, so Imtiaz Tyab is joining us now from the UAE. Imtiaz, I want to start with the reports from Iran saying that they busted a CIA spy ring. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was weighing in earlier saying Iran has a history of lying. So, what do we know about these apparent arrests? And apparently, at least, I don't know if the executions have already occurred, but certainly some of them have been sentenced to death.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And really, to be perfectly honest with you, Anne-Marie, it's so hard to independently verify these accusations. And we do have to remember that, Iran does periodically announce that it has arrested or even executed people accused of spying. But we do understand about this specific case just announced today, them saying that they have charged 17 people with allegations of spying on behalf of the CIA. Some of them will face execution. A bit of ambiguity as to whether or not anybody has been executed. But as we've been saying, this is a preoccupation within the Iranian state for a very long time. In fact, if you pay attention to Iranian media, every so often you'll see stories of arrests where they accuse people of being spies, whether it's for the CIA or for Israel. But again, it's very difficult to say. But we have been hearing from the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo calling it lies.
And Imtiaz, we also want to ask you about the tensions in the Gulf. I mean, it feels to me as, on one hand, it looks as if these sanctions are working because Iran is backed into a corner, and it feels as if they're taking these sort of aggressive actions because of these sanctions, because of the drop in oil revenue that they've experienced, and yet it could lead to greater military action in the region, which no one wants to see.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in the words of one Iran watcher that I was speaking to earlier this morning, Iran has very little to lose at this stage. It thought it had this agreement that it reached with the U.S. during the Obama administration. That ultimately fell apart. And now we've seen sort of over the last 3 months these sort of altercations just building and building and building. And now we have this situation here in the Gulf with Iran seizing a British flag tanker and taking its crew, its international crew, into custody. And of course, that follows a similar situation in Gibraltar, in which Britain seized an Iranian vessel, which they accused of carrying oil for Syria, which of course is banned under the EU rules, where they have sanctioned Syria for acquiring any kind of oil from countries like Iran or really any other. And it really just goes to what you say, Vlad, that at this stage, Iran is really just backed into a corner, and we are seeing this situation here really just ratcheting up rather. But the big question is, where's it all going to lead? And many are concerned, as you rightfully point out, that it could lead to some sort of major military escalation.
When it comes to that tanker that you mentioned, the latest one seized by Iran, have we heard anything from the Trump administration on that?
Not a lot, surprisingly. We first heard from President Trump about this on when it was first announced just a couple of days ago that Iran had seized this vessel. But really, the focus has been on the United Kingdom and on the British government. Theresa May, the outgoing British Prime Minister, and really one of her last acts as Prime Minister before her successor, who will be announced within the next few days or so, is announced, has basically tabled what's called a Cobra meeting, which is when essentially ministers and intelligence bosses all come together to meet with the Prime Minister to really try to figure out what to do. Now, we understand that that meeting is ongoing, and we understand that the British government is trying to figure out some sort of way to de-escalate this situation with diplomacy. However, we are hearing that they are considering some sort of economic sanction against Iran for this action in the Gulf. Whatever the case, we do know that the British government is in close talks with Washington to try to figure out some strategy forward, but at this stage they haven't announced just what exactly they're going to do to retaliate.
All right, well, we are all watching closely. Imtiaz, thank you so much.